This is Greg Troutline with Offshore Engineer TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by James Richards, the Well Abandonment Director of Well Safe Solutions, to discuss his team's experience with platform well abandonment. So, James, to start us off, can you give a brief career biography with insights on your position and your responsibilities today?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks for having me here today as well, Greg. Yeah, so I guess I started off in the industry back in 2008 as a graduate with BG Group, as it was then. And I guess with that, I had a pretty good opportunity to work across a whole range of projects across a good portion of the globe as well, ranging from HPHD wells in the North Sea all the way through to deep water drilling in East Africa. So that was a really good kind of foundation and intro to the industry. I then went on to, in 2013, join CNR, where I kind of was working based in the North Sea, looking after their assets here. Obviously, a lot of those were kind of in the late life stage of their kind of life cycle. And I guess that eventually probably predictably transitioned into well decommissioning, first of all with the Murchison platform and then with the Ninian Northern platform. And I think it was through that really that I kind of realised what a diverse and exciting area that well decommissioning was, and some of the challenges that were associated with that. And that led me joining WellSafe in 2019 ultimately, which was a bit of a unique opportunity to join a new start company, trying to take all of those lessons learned from that BG days and more specifically the well decommissioning I'd done at CNR and put that into practice. So yeah, I guess at WellSafe my role is as the well engineering director. I lead the well engineering team. We're kind of delivering a pretty wide range of different projects, from desktop studies that we're doing for decommissioning projects that might not happen for years, all the way through to actually running live execution of decommissioning projects. And everything in between. I guess the main kind of role I have on a day-to-day basis is developing the team and growing the team. I guess the skill set that you need for P&A is quite unique, and so the blend of team we need is quite unique. So we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that we've got the right blend of skills, both from a wells point of view, intervention, bringing service companies into that mix as well. And then delivering value with that team through safe and efficient decommissioning. A big emphasis on the design, where we can, you make a lot more savings in the design stage than you can in operations. I think if you can eliminate a barrier, then you can save 50% of your well decommissioning costs in some examples, whereas technologies and clever tools can certainly save you some money, but nothing of that order of magnitude. So yeah, it's kind of making sure that we get involved as early as we can and really start to bring those skills that we just talked about to bear on projects to get the most value for our clients.
Can you give a brief company overview and to by the numbers look at the company today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I guess a good place to start is we're about 7 years old, and we'll be 8 years old in August. But 7 years old. I guess we've got three offices in three different countries. So the UK, Perth, and then in Malaysia as well. We've got 3 assets, 2 semi-subs and one jackup. Yeah. I think investment to date totals around about 250 million, which is obviously a significant sum, mainly in getting the rigs and getting ourselves set up. And then as a team, since we started in those 7 years, we've decommissioned over 100 wells, with our rigs or with our teams using third-party assets. Headcount we're sitting, around about the 450 mark. So the team's grown at a pretty rapid rate since we started 7 years ago. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, I think, for most of us here. I think say one year at WellSafe equals 3 years in other places. It kind of feels that things move very quickly anyway.
James, I know you referenced the size of the fleet briefly in the previous question, but if it's okay, I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the WellSafe fleet, specifically looking at the size, but more importantly, any of the unique characteristics and capabilities. And, important for my shipbuilding viewers, are there any plans to grow the fleet in the coming year, 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah. So yeah, as I said, it's 3 rigs. We've got the WellSafe Guardian was the first rig we bought, which is a semi-submersible. The next rig we bought was our jackup, the WellSafe Protector, and then the last rig to join the fleet was the WellSafe Defender. Each of these was, a bit of a North Sea workhorse before we bought it, and had kind of been involved in, drilling a lot of the wells that we're now decommissioning. And that really is why we bought those rigs, focusing on legacy assets. You don't need modern, 6th, 7th, whatever generation rigs to go and decommission these wells that are 30 or 40 years old. And in fact, I think, the BOPs and a lot of these modern rigs would, simply couldn't be supported by these old wellheads on things. So having, the rigs, the right sized, fit for purpose rigs is absolutely what we're about. Yeah, I think in terms of growing the fleet, yeah, we're certainly looking to grow our business, utilize other assets. That's not necessarily with our own rigs. Certainly platform P&A is one area that we're kind of looking to bring our kind of experience into. As I talked about at the intro, a lot of my experience is platform P&A. So I think bringing that experience and, the experience of the wider team to bear on platforms is something that we can bring to the market. So that could be using, hydraulic workover units, modular units. It could be reactivating the existing drilling packages on platforms. So I guess that there's a less direct way of growing our fleet and growing our capability. Otherwise, for rigs, I think, yeah, it's more opportunistic, really. I think if there are rigs available of the right spec for the fields that we know need decommissioning, then absolutely we would look to make acquisitions. So it's if and when, as and when those opportunities come up, and we'll look to take advantage of them.
You mentioned specifically the Well-Safe Guardian semi-submersible, and I understand that rig was fitted with a Trident intervention system and a D300 saturation dive spread, said to be the only rig to feature this capability in the North Sea. Can you tell us why that's significant, and how does this improve its operational scope and efficiency?
Yeah, so the Well-Safe Guardian, as you say, we've got a saturation dive system on that, and also put an intervention system on it, and I think that definitely makes the Well-Safe Guardian a unique asset. It's a long time since any rigs had saturation dive systems on them. I think the reason that kind of transitioned out and wasn't needed anymore is because wells could be made diverless, and you didn't need dive systems to go and run these systems. ROV capabilities have come on a long way, and tree and wellhead designs come on a long way. But ultimately, when you're decommissioning, you're almost taking a bit of a step back in time. And you're having to go and decommission these wells that do have, trees on them that need divers to manipulate them and to function them. And I think around about 30% of the North Sea well stock was drilled before the first diverless subsea system was run. And I think when you kind of total up the number of wells, I think that's more than 1,000 wells are sitting out there that need divers to go and complete the decommissioning scope. So there's a pretty clear kind of market for rigs with a diver saturation dive system on them. Obviously, not to mention the hundreds of wells that through age and kind of degradation and condition of them need they might have been run as diverless systems, but now need divers to go and do those. So yeah, we saw with WellSafe a real clear kind of need for a tool like this, like the WellSafe Guardian. And I guess it offers three advantages. One is that it allows us to go out and do diving work scopes to prepare the wells. So whether that be reinstating hydraulic controls on trees, testing barriers, removing infrastructure from around wells in some instances, even removing, bent over bits of drill pipe and things like that. And having divers allows us to kind of do a lot of that work. The second, once you've kind of prepared it, is then SimOps. So we can do this diving work while we are working on adjacent wells. So we could be downhole setting plugs on one well, and on another we could be kind of installing some hydraulic lines to prepare the well for the next set of operations. And I guess the third kind of reason is it just de-risks things. I think when you have divers there, put it another way, if you don't have divers and you encounter a leaking hydraulic fitting, then that's not work that can easily be done by an ROV. Suddenly you need divers, and if you've got the capability to mobilize divers at relatively short notice to a rig, then that's a great mitigation to some of these risks that exist with these old wells. So yeah, having the diver capability really kind of gives us quite a lot more than your typical module, and without having to try and get into the complicated scheduling to align rig and dive vessel schedules, which is often quite a challenge. So yeah, I think having it all in one module solution, as we refer to it, is a big asset for the North Sea.
Staying on that technology side, Obviously there are a lot of technologies that go into making this operation safe and to making it efficient. So when you look today at the technologies that exist, maybe the technologies that are under development, which do you consider to be those key systems to make decommissioning safe and efficient?
Yeah, there's, as you say, there's a lot of different technologies. And I think, some of the standout ones, the thermite plugs have been talked around quite a lot. And we're starting to see those being used on wells in a variety of different ways, not necessarily as barriers in themselves, but to kind of, I guess, create a foot on the well to allow you then to complete more standard P&A operations. Yeah, I think other technologies, the ability to log through multiple casing strings is another big one. That the technology's there or thereabouts. I think it's now about trying to gain confidence, or the industry to gain confidence in those tools and technologies. So these have massive bearings on the cost for decommissioning a well. Some of the other ones that maybe aren't so typically thought of are for example, some of the tools and technologies around making lighter weight BOPs. So instead of having to have hydraulically functioned shear rams, you can have explosively functioned shear rams, which sounds a bit drastic, but ultimately what it means is you can end up with some very lightweight BOPs that, for some of these really weak old wellheads where as an industry, we're struggling with how we can, how can we get onto these wells and safely decommission them. And this opens up some other opportunities there for doing things with that type of technology. So yeah, I think there's a lot. I think ultimately companies need to have the confidence from companies like WellSafe, other technology companies need to have the confidence from operators, from license holders that, this is the right tool and technology, and then they can continue to develop it, spend the money on getting the right tools and equipment manufactured so we can go and use them on the projects. But there is a big bit with technology as well, which, I think it's making sure that we don't view technology as the magic bullet. I don't think there are very many technologies out there that are a true kind of silver bullet. I think it's probably about using tools and technologies in the right way. So all these new tools and technologies, are another thing to have in your toolbox, which is great. But I think we've seen some of the biggest advantages in just being good at some of the standard stuff, or avoiding having to do things because going back to what we were talking about at the start of the conversation, that you're really focused on getting the engineering right at the start to avoid having to do things that are unnecessary, perhaps when you start digging into it.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about markets, because I understand that you recently announced an expansion to Australia and the Asia Pacific. When you look at the markets globally, what do you see as the existing and the growing hotspots for decommissioning activities in the coming years?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because I think you asked us a couple of years ago, then we said that North Sea is kind of right there, and we're doing P&A, and that some of these other basins, you mentioned Australia, are maybe coming in the next couple of years. I think what we've seen with the uncertainty in the UK over the last couple of years is that hasn't really got going as we were hoping and as we were expecting. So the answer is probably the same: is that we're right on the cusp of a busy period in the North Sea. So in terms of where the next kind of hotspot is going to be, I think it is the North Sea. I just don't think we've quite been there yet. Australia is definitely there. I guess the age of their assets over there are maybe a little bit behind ours, but they're certainly bearing down on that kind of decommissioning phase. I think the main areas that we're seeing a lot of interest at the moment is Southeast Asia. The Asia Pacific market's really picking up. We're getting a lot of interest from there, trying to understand, how do you do P&A in the North Sea, and how does that compare with the challenges we've got there? That some of the wells are quite different and the conditions are quite different. So it's not necessarily applying all the lessons carbon copy. I think it's taking those lessons and then thinking about how they can be applied out there. Brazil is another big area. There's a lot of deep water wells that they're drilling, and they're still producing, but the people don't think so much about the shallower water stuff that's on the shelf there that is kind of getting to that 30-year kind of old mark, and hence production's dropping off, and companies are starting to look at decommissioning. So I think Brazil's probably a big area that will be getting a lot of attention in the next few years.
offshore operations and their emissions and their environmental signature are a big and growing issue. And carbon capture and storage is obviously a growing market globally. Is this a thing for WellSafe? And I mean by that, is WellSafe Solutions equipped for repurposing field and reservoir infrastructure for carbon capture and storage?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's a really good overlap actually. And what we found, when carbon capture was sort of initially talked around, was thinking about, if you're abandoning a well, which is our kind of, I guess, our kind of main focus area. What happens if you're abandoning a well for CCS? What do you do in a field that's already been, abandoned effectively, and then you want to inject CCS? And I guess that part of that is these legacy well assessments, looking at these legacy abandonments, planning abandonments with a view of future CCS in mind. And I guess the skills and knowledge that you build up through that then, naturally progresses into drilling CCS wells. And so I guess from that point of view, I think, well decommissioning is a really good basis and has a lot of lessons that you can apply through that, and a lot of the kind of the core skills that run through all of those different parts of the business. So that's something that we've been involved with a few different projects, and I think we're certainly kind of well set up to kind of carry on with those projects in the future. And I think that ties rather nicely into that whole late life kind of view of decommissioning. It's part of that late life journey. So it's one part of it. CCS is one part of it, and your late life intervention and maximizing the value out of the field towards the late life is another part of it. And it's the same key skills that exist in each of those parts of that late life journey, and that's something that we think we can really add value to with the team that we've got here.
Can you share with us a recent or ongoing case study or two, a project that was either technically challenging or otherwise showcases what you see as the technical capability of the WellSafe team?
Yeah, there's one good project that we did a year or so back now, but it kind of captured a couple of different technologies, approaches, and that was on a southern North Sea platform in the North Sea, and that it was with our jackup with the WellSafe Protector, and we approached it with a SimOps, or simultaneous operations approach, where we were doing digital slickline operations hung off the bottom of the rig on one hand, but then we were running live operations through the BOPs, through the main rotary. So I guess with those two simultaneous operations, we were able to set plugs on wells, and then rather than having to run the BOP, rig it up, rig it down on each well, we were then able to kind of effectively what we call hop the BOP from well to well, which saved us all of that rig up and rig down time. So not only were we doing operations simultaneously, so kind of making double the progress at the same time, but it also meant that we then saved time further down the line with this hopping of the BOP. So that was a really big success for us. And on the same project, interestingly, I guess at the other kind of end of it is we haven't really touched on it, but it's the uncertainty in P&A, and one of the challenges is going into these old wells. You don't quite know what you're going to find. And this project was, towards the last stage, was another good example of that, where we encountered a velocity string in one of the wells that the records didn't show existed, but nonetheless it was there. And so coming up with a plan to how to recover this velocity string whilst running operations was a big challenge, and ultimately involved being able to hop onto the next thing, work that whilst in the background having an additional team work up the solution to that. And ultimately what we were able to do was come up with a solution for it, get it ready, the solution ready to ship offshore, rigged up without having lost any days waiting on that solution. So we were able to carry on operations for the rest of the wells, and then come back to that well at the end and address that with the right tools and the right programs and the right plans in place. So yeah, I guess that's another good example. So one project and two examples of where we've kind of had some particular challenges and being able to overcome them.